Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Alison from the Postgraduate Association. I'd like to begin actually by acknowledging and pay respect to the ancestors, elders, and descendants of the lands upon which we meet today. The Widjabul peoples of the Bundjalung Nation is where I'm coming from, and are mindful these lands always were and always will be Aboriginal land. So welcome everyone to using Qualtrics to design surveys with Dr. Megan Lee from Bond University. I did send out an email to everyone asking them to create a free account with Qualtrics. So hopefully you had time to do that, and I'll be following along today as well because I think it would be very useful for me to learn Qualtrics. So in the chat box, I've put in there, become a member of the Postgraduate Association. I think it would be really beneficial. Did I put in that? Now I've lost my chat box, but it doesn't matter. That might be enough from me. Thank you, Megan. Over to you.
Thank you, Alison. Welcome everybody to using Qualtrics to design your surveys. I'm Dr. Megan Lee. I work at Bond University, but I am a recent PhD graduate from Southern Cross Uni. So I graduated last year in June, so just under 12 months ago. I am very passionate about the Southern Cross Postgraduate Association. I was a member for the entire time I was doing my PhD, and they were an unbelievable support system for me when I had some negative things happen to me during my supervision. So would highly recommend joining the SCPA. I now teach statistics and psychology over at Bond, and I am supervising my own honours and PhD students as well. So I love sharing all the things that I have learnt and that made my life easy during my PhD. So today we will be exploring the wonderful world of Qualtrics. Now, before we get started, I just want to know, 0 being 0, absolutely no understanding of Qualtrics, and 10 being an absolute whiz at Qualtrics, where are we all kind of sitting on that continuum, on that scale? Alison's on a 0. Good. Okay. Everyone else, what are we sitting on? Oh, good. Okay. Excellent. Because I did design the workshop for people who have never even logged into Qualtrics before. So the very basics, all the way up to designing your own survey, what all the buttons mean inside Qualtrics, some of the issues that can happen, things like that. So that is perfect that we're all kind of at that beginner level, because I have pitched the workshop perfectly then. Yay. All right, let's get going then. If you have any questions at all during the presentation or the workshop, please do pop it into the chat. I have the chat box on my screen so I can answer any questions. I do tend to go quite quickly through things. Tell me to slow down if I'm going too fast, and throw questions my way. All right, so when we use Qualtrics, usually the first time we access Qualtrics is in our honours year, or when we're doing our very own research project. But there are a couple of things that need to happen before you can successfully create a Qualtrics survey. Now, one of the good things about the Qualtrics survey is that when you do an ethics application, the ethics committee will require you to provide them with a complete list of the survey questions, your participant information sheet, your debrief statement, your social media blurb, your consent form. All those things need to be prepared for your ethics application. But those are the types of things that also need to be prepared to create your survey as well. So you're not double handling information. You should really be creating your Qualtrics survey around the same time as you're doing your ethics application, so that you can actually give the ethics team your a copy of the actual Qualtrics survey, so they can see how it looks inside the survey. But before you start your survey, you will need to have your participant information sheet completely written the way that your participants are going to see it. You'll need to construct a Word document with all your survey questions, including all your demographics and any pre-validated scales that you're going to use. And you will need information from papers, from scientific papers, about how the scale questions are scored. So, for example, I commonly use the Centre for Epidemiological Studies for Depression scale. The scale is a 20-item scale, ranging from 0 to 3. So there's four Likert scales, 0 to 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. No, 0, 1, 2, 3. And they're really, really important information to have before you develop this survey, so that in Qualtrics we can code the values of your scale, so that once it goes into your statistical analysis software, you're not having to go back, recode things, and everything is done within your survey, so things don't get confusing. And you need your debrief statement, something that ethics will approve for you to use to say goodbye to your participants, or send them to another Qualtrics survey. This is commonly done when you do a survey and part of the survey, there is a question like, would you be available to participate in a future interview or focus group asking questions about this study? And that's quite common in a PhD, where you have a quantitative survey followed by interviews or focus groups with participants to fully look at the rich lived experience. So that's another way of ending a survey, but we will have a look at that as we go along. So those are the things that we need to make sure that we have before we can even start. Any questions about preparation for Qualtrics before we move into the actual program?
Yeah, did everyone manage to create their free account? I sent a link out the other day.
Yeah, pop that into the chat.
Yes, good. I managed it too, so yes from me.
Good work. All right. All right, so this is the front page, login or sign up. This is where you would have signed up. So we've all been through that. I have 2 Qualtrics programs or versions. I have one for Bond and I have one for SCU. Just trying to keep my projects separate so I know which university I'm doing what thing in. But when you do log in to your Qualtrics, it will look like this. So this is your home page. In the home page, you have several different options, and I'm going to drag my home page over so that we can all see there. Okay, I'm going to move our little faces over to my other screen. Okay, so on our home page, we have, it will always open up here. You've got your account settings up the top there if you need to use them. This will also tell you what university you are open with, so what page you are open with. So I always check that to make sure I'm in the right university.
Just out of interest, sorry to interrupt, just out of interest there, when I was prepping for today, I went right through what were the software that's available to students, and apparently Qualtrics is for staff only at SCU. So
interesting.
That's why I sent out the link to make a free account. So
yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Especially considering like the only reason students would be using Qualtrics is to do research for the university.
I know, and maybe I'll
check into that.
double check that.
Sure,
yeah,
I'm pretty sure all my friends and I, when we were doing our PhD, we had the SCU Qualtrics page. Yeah, definitely have a look into that. All right, so you've got your 3 bars at the top, which will step you through the different pages on Qualtrics. You've got this home page, the projects page, which is where all of your surveys will be, a catalog, workflow, directories, and library. I have never used any of these 4 options. I'm always in the projects page. That's basically where everything happens. Excellent. So this is my projects page. I have 7 current projects. 4 of them have been shared with me from other collaborators. So this is a really good use of the software. So if, say, Alison creates a survey and we are collaborators and she's at SCU and I'm at Bond, she can send me a link to the survey and it will pop up in my shared with me account. So these are all the names of the people that have shared with me. I've shared with myself. So I've shared from my SCU account to my Bond account. That's why I'm in my own one. But these are people that I'm collaborating on projects with currently that have active surveys. But I always click on all of my projects, and these are all the different surveys that I have. The status will tell me whether they're active, whether they've closed, and whether it's a very new one. So my brand new one that happened this week, yesterday, I believe, is a project I'm working on with a good friend of mine on vicarious trauma and secondary teachers. I've also got personality and social media use, which is something that I use in my classes. It's a survey I use in my psychology class. And then one of my projects that has just recently closed, the association between vegetarian for adult life and depressive symptoms. Now, if you have done the last 4 workshops with the SCPA on statistics that I ran over the last 4 weeks, you will know everything there is to know about that survey. So we ran through from the very beginning of the descriptive statistics all the way through to the post hoc analyses on that data, and it is brand new. It's only a month old. So today we will be revisiting this survey, and I'll be regenerating it to show you what it looked like from the very beginning of when I created that project. So the only thing you really need in the projects is to know that this is where all of your surveys sit, the dates that they were created, and you've got some options that you can use here. You can rename your project, you can copy it. That can be really helpful. Say in a year's time, I want to rerun this survey, but I want to change a couple of things inside of it. I can copy it exactly and do some changes so I don't lose that original data. So that 611 responses that I've got in that current survey, which has been closed, if I want to rerun the survey, I can copy it and duplicate it completely and get new responses, and then they won't be mixed in with the previous survey. You can edit your survey, you can preview it, which means, and we'll have a look at that once we've created a survey, where you can preview it and see how it runs without having to add a participant yourself. Distributing the survey, so that's all the links to get it out onto your social media, on your email, things like that. Data and analysis. So what's really exciting about Qualtrics is that you can do little mini data analysis inside the survey software without having to pop it into SPSS. So that's really helpful during data collection if you want to know some things. So the way that we have used that in the past is in my Vegetarian for Adult Life project, we wanted to see how many vegans and how many vegetarians we were collecting while we were collecting, and we kind of wanted them to be even. So if we were getting more vegans than vegetarians, then we would push our recruitment more towards vegetarians to try and even the numbers up. So we used that data and analysis tab to find out some interesting things. If you've got too many females and not enough males, the same thing, you can push it out and recruit to certain genders, things like that. Yes. So what we will do today, we won't be looking at any of my currently created surveys. we will be looking at how to create a brand new project from scratch, from the very beginning. So to do that, we need to go to create a project. Now I have to remember where it is. There it is. It was hiding from me. Have we got questions? I will just check the questions before we move on. Yeah. Talk to the grad school. That it really should be something that's offered. You can't do a PhD without Qualtrics unless you're doing qualitative research. It doesn't make sense not to have that offered. So, okay, so let's create a project. So if everyone's following along, just click the create a project button. We want to create a project from scratch. We want a survey. So it's all pretty much very easy. There are options to get guided projects, which are all under here. And they're samples of surveys that people have created before, but I have never used these. And I don't think that they would be very useful for research. Oh, here's some academic ones. Well, there's one for informed consent. But you really want to start your own from scratch. So click on survey. A little box will pop up telling you what is included. You can also go follow the links and look at some really good videos if you get stuck. But we want to get started and you want to name your project. So I'm going to name this Veg for Life 2. And I want to create a blank survey project. But a really cool thing that you can do is you can copy a survey from an existing project. So if you've done a survey before and you've got the same demographic questions at the beginning and just different scales, you can copy over the survey and remove those scales, and that means that you won't have to put all your demographics in again. You can import from a QSF file, but we are just going to create a blank project. Just like most software, it's quite slow. Right, so now that we have created our new project, we are going to look at building questions. And I'm going to show you all the different question styles that you will potentially use in Qualtrics and the most common way of building scales. But the first thing that we really need to do when we are creating a survey is looking at protecting your survey. So the first thing you ever really want to create is your capture box. And the capture box, and I'll tell you a bit of a story about something that happened to me very early on. So we were doing a project on communities, perceptions, and misconceptions about organic foods. And we sent out the survey online and snowballed it. And we also sent it out on a group page about organics research that one of the lead researchers had created. And someone on that site spammed our survey on like the third day, and a bot got in there and just started answering all our questions. Every like 30 seconds, a new survey was being created.
Oh,
so
no.
Yeah, we had about 2,000 responses from the bots, and all of them were against organic foods. And the really tricky thing about it was that the bot was answering all the multiple choice questions, but also we had a fair few qualitative open-ended boxes in our survey where we asked people to give us their opinions on organic foods in words, and the bots were also creating answers for those. So about how bad organics are and like pesticides and all this stuff, and it was just like crazy. But we had to abandon the survey completely because we had all genuine responses mixed in with our bot responses, and we couldn't figure out which ones were bots and which ones were genuine. So we had to scrap the whole survey to begin with. So that project never got off the ground. So let me teach you how to stop that. So we've got here in question type several options. You've got multiple choice. You can have a text entry where participants enter their own text. I would highly recommend making those very minimal because human error is massive. And even if the question is the most simple question you can think, like, what is your age in years? You will still have people write ridiculous things that don't make sense. So try and keep your questions at multiple choice as you can. I still use age as a text entry box, even though it's the Wild West. You can do a text or a graphic, which is really cool. So you can put a picture in and ask people to look at the picture, answer a question. Matrix table, which is the most commonly used one for Likert scales. When you're building your Likert scales, I'll show you how to build these later. You've got sliders, you've got form fields, you can rank order, you can do things side by side. But the capture one is the most important. You can get a participant's signature, which is really cool, which would be great for consent. Here is your capture verification. So I would always start by creating a capture question, and I would just not even put a question in there, maybe. So you can do this, but there's also another way of doing a recapture, which is where you have to answer a question where you click certain boxes as well. So that is the most important thing. Yeah, so I've just called it capture.
It looks like some of those functions aren't available. For maybe it's the
only if you're a staff member. So this is why it's going to be so important to like check with HDR.
Maybe it's the limitations of their free account thing.
Okay, Carol asks, can everyone with access to Qualtrics and SCU see your survey? I asked because of the survey, so we can access to see questions. No. So the only way you can see someone else's survey is if they share it with you. There's lots of confidentiality issues with sharing surveys, etc. So feel quite confident that if you build a survey in the SCU survey Qualtrics, that no one else can see it unless you specifically invite them to see it. There are question banks that you can access to help you with survey structure and things like that. Okay, so we are definitely going to be talking to HDR about getting everybody a staff account. Otherwise, these are very, very important things that you need to have, in my opinion. Good. So we've seen that you've got the options of question type. You can also have how you want your question aligned, whether you want it light or dark. And then there's some logics down the bottom, which I will go through with you in a moment. So the next thing that we want to do when we are building a survey after protecting ourselves is make sure that you pop your participant information sheet in. So to do this, we need to have our participant information sheet ready. So here is the one I have for this project. And we want to copy and paste exactly what ethics will approve. and then we want to pop it into Qualtrics. So to do that, we add a block, and the block will just have the participant information sheet in it by itself. I always name these. The participants can't see these little question blocks here, but it helps you later on, because if you've got information about your scales that you don't want the participant to see, you can pop them in there. So in this block, I would like to add a new question. I can also import a question from a library of questions that I've done in the past, which is quite cool. But I want to add a new question. I would like it to be text. I hope this is the right one. Yeah. Just text by itself. So there's no question for the person to answer. And we just want to paste our participant information sheet in as ethics has approved it. Now you have to do a little bit of tidying up. So I just put spaces in. Just to break it up so it's easy for the participants to read. And I'll show you in a second what this will look like, because it won't look like this in the survey. I'll show you in a second what it will look like. So you can be in charge of how the survey looks, and we'll have a look at style later. But what's really cool is if you have a staff account and you've got the SCU staff account, it will automatically make the style of the survey in SCU colors with the SCU logo, and you don't really have to worry. All right, so that's our participant information sheet in there. It does jump around a bit. Okay. Beautiful. Any questions about adding your information sheet? We actually forgot once, which was not great, and several participants had completed the survey without having their information sheet, so that was no good. But you can, once you publish your survey, you can go and pop it back in. So don't be afraid, but maybe write down the steps that you need to take. Did you set up through this Spark? Oh. Okay. The next thing that we can do. Now, did everyone have that text graphic option? That's like a very basic option, hopefully.
So I'm just checking the link that Lawrence sent, which was to access Qualtrics through Spark. And that probably looks better than the free account that I sent out the other day. I just thought it was restricted. But this looks like it's what Lauren put in the chat box. It looks like it may be a version that has all the functions for people. So
that the students from SCU can use. Excellent. Good job.
Thanks, Lauren.
Great.
Okay.
All right. So the next thing that we want to do is we would like to, for my survey in particular, and not all surveys will have this, but in my survey there was inclusion and exclusion criteria. So the inclusion criteria was that you were over 18. No, that wasn't one. We had under 18s. Basically, the only exclusion criteria was that you had to have been a vegetarian or a vegan for your entire adult life. Otherwise, you didn't qualify. So we did a qualifying question, have you identified as vegetarian for your entire adult life, to make sure that we didn't have people in our survey who were not qualified. So if you were vegetarian but not your entire life, then you weren't included. Okay. So to do that, we would add another block, and you kind of want to keep your questions. So the recapture in a block, you want your participant information sheet in a block, then you want your qualifying or excluding question in a block, and then you'll put all your demographics in a block together, and then your scales in a block each. So, and we'll show you that as we go. So we want to add a new question. This time we want it to be multiple choice. Now, when we click multiple choice, we get some new options here on the left-hand side. So answer type, allow one answer or allow multiple answers. So if you've got a question like, how many of these options do you identify with? And you can get people, and say you have 10 options, they can click multiple. If you're only allowing one answer, that's what I usually use. And I usually force logic. So I'll show you that in a second, where it forces a participant to create a response. So for this one, I'll allow one answer. The question was, have you identified, what was it? Have you been a vegetarian your entire adult life? And this is where you've got to make some decisions about format. Like, are you going to have all your questions in lowercase? Are you going to use all your questions in upper and lowercase, and just try and be consistent? This is not very good. That's better. No, it's not. That's better. So have you been a vegetarian your entire adult life? Question mark. And then we only want 2 choices. We want yes or no. So we'll bring it down to 2. And Qualtrics is a little bit smart and will create questions for you sometimes. So that will pre-fill sometimes. You will often have to change that because it won't match what you want. But you can go in and just change them here. They're very easy. Now, for this question, it's really important that if someone clicks no, that they get sent to the end of the survey, because we don't want them to be filling out any more of the survey. Okay, so there are yes or no. I would reverse order those, actually. That makes more sense. And then you can do a format, like, do you want it in a list? Do you want it as a drop-down box? Would you like it as a select box? I just always use a list. You can do an alignment. You can do it horizontally. You can do it vertically. You can do it in columns. So there's all these amazing choices that you can use to design your survey. So we would like to do a skip logic on this question, which means that if anyone clicks no, so they will be skipped from this question to the end of the survey if no is selected. And that will just mean that anyone who's not qualified will go to the end of the survey. Okay, confirm. And then you'll have a little skip logic box here to tell you that there's a skip logic on that question. Any questions about qualifying questions? Good. There's your skip logic. So the next thing that we would do is we would build our demographic questions. So a really important thing about survey construction is you want your most important questions answered first. Now, demographics are really important because they are part of your descriptive statistics, which tells you or describes your participant pool. So they are very important. The next set of questions that are most important is your dependent variable. So for me, my dependent variable, or my outcome that I'm looking at studying, is depression. So I would always put my depression scale after my demographic questions. And then my independent variable, or my predictor that I'm trying to find the change in depression in, is diet quality. So I would always put diet quality next. So my dietary screening tool would go after my depression questions. And then any other covariates that I'm interested in, like sleep quality or social connection or physical activity or sunlight exposure, things like that, they would go afterwards. Now, why that is important is because when you construct your survey and your participants do your survey, we always try and make them 10 to 15 minutes so that they're nice and short so that they don't get fatigued. But if participants leave your survey because they get bored, or what's very common is they'll be doing the survey on their phone, they'll get distracted in their environment, forget that they were doing it and leave, at least you've got a better chance of them doing your most important questions if you put all your important variables first. So demographics, then your outcome scale, and then your predictor scale, and then all your covariate scales or your other interesting scales after. That does happen quite a lot. So, and at this stage of survey construction, you want to make a decision about what percentage you will accept of completion of your survey. Are you going to accept only people who do 100% of your survey? Are you going to accept only those who do 80%? I usually put a priori decision that everyone will be included who completes both the outcome and the predictor scales. Let's go and have a look at how to create our demographics. No questions. Everyone seems to be following along nicely, which is really good. So we're going to add another block. And we're going to call this block demographics. And we're going to add a multiple choice question. And the multiple choice question is going to be gender, I believe. Let's have a look. Yes, great. Okay. What gender do you identify as? Now, this is it's an interesting and sensitive one. I have always used male, female, non-binary, transgender, and prefer not to say. But yesterday, my wonderful ND student told me that, and he's in education, told me that he went and looked up what the most appropriate way or the most sensitive way of describing transgender, and he is using non-conforming gender. I believe that's what he wrote. I usually put transgender in. So just these things are always changing. So just be very mindful of being sensitive throughout your survey and making sure that we're using the most up-to-date, correct terminology for things. Prefer not to say is important in gender as well. You can also add another input. And as you can see, it's the whole consistency with upper and lowercase and things. And other. Now, if you provide any question that has an other box, you should always add a second question, which is a text entry question, and write other, please specify. So the reason that we do this, and this has happened to me in many surveys, is it happens to me with education a lot. I'll put education in year 10, year 12, bachelor degree, master's degree, postgraduate degree, PhD, and TAFE or certificate. And then I'll always put other. And in other, people will put things in that I haven't thought of. So, and this can happen with gender as well. So anytime that you have an other option, always put please specify. Then when you do your data analysis, you can look at that other please specify column, and you can either, if people have written something other that actually fits, which often happens as well, you just pop them, code them as the male, female, non-binary, whatever. But if they write something that you weren't expecting, you can add a new category to your gender box, which is really helpful and very inclusive. So we're always trying to be inclusive and accessible in research. Great. Any questions about multiple choice? Good. Everyone's doing so well. I get lots more questions in the stats workshops.
Megan, could I ask you,
Mhm.
just how you set that up? If you automatically click other, does it pop up the question 5? Or do
No.
you okay, so you can't link it if you then press other and then you get the text box.
Oh, you probably could. Yes, let's have a look. You probably could. Hey, good. Yes. So, very excellent. I've never done that before. That's so cool. So, allow text entry, and it'll give you, so then we would want to change other. Please specify. There you go. I learned something today. Thank you. We can get rid of this one. There we go. So there was a little delete button, very easy to get rid of. Nice. I really like that. I wonder what that's going to look like in the data analysis software. It'll probably just create a new column, hopefully. All right. So the next question. We are going to look at how to create a free text question. We kind of did that with the other box, but we're going to create what is your age in years. Very simple. Add new question, text entry. What is your age in years? And then your participants have the ability to write in there. Now, when this happens and you do your data analysis, you will have to go through that column and take out things because people will write their age and then put years behind it. Lots of people do that. Or people will write ridiculous things that aren't even an age that you can be. So just be aware. But you can clean that all up in the data analysis. That's no problem. Any questions about free entry before we get into the more difficult stuff? So we're going to move into things that are a little bit more tricky now. So most of the time when we are developing surveys, we've got our demographic questions, which are usually multiple choice or free text. But when we are developing scales for our survey, they have been made by other people, and they need to go in exactly how they look from the paper that they came from. So I'll give you an example here. Here are all my survey questions. This is what I developed before I did my survey. There's all my questions. We've got several demographics, sunlight exposure, and then we have our scales. Now, this is exactly how these scales have been built by the people who built them. And we don't want to change anything because that would ruin the validity and reliability of the scale. Now, there are times where you can change these answers to be more culturally sensitive or culturally specific, not with the depression scale. We don't usually change those, but for like the dietary screening tool that we use, we quite often will change the types of foods inside the questions to fit that culture. So the Vegetarian for Life data set was mainly recruiting people who were Indian, Australian, or from cultures from the Indian culture. So we changed some of the wording from like Hungry Jacks and things, and we put in naan and poppadoms, and we made sure that we had someone who was an Indian Australian on our team, so that we were being culturally sensitive with our choices and making sure that everything in the survey fit the Indian culture. So that's the only time that you can really change things, and it doesn't impact the validity and the reliability of these scales. But at no time do you remove questions or completely change the wording of a question to suit how you do it, or the coding of the questions. So they need to be identical to how they are pre-validated, because there has been a very stringent system put on this scale to make sure that it will be scientifically valid when you use it. So we would add a whole new block for a scale. We would call it the CESD just to remind us of what it is, or you can do the whole name, the full name, if it's the first time you're using it and you think maybe you'll forget. We'll add a new question, and we want to do a matrix table this time. I'll show you how to do these scales in a different way. And then we would click to write the question exactly the way that the scale has. So below is a list of the ways you might have felt or behaved. Please tell me how often, you have felt this way during the past week. So it must always be exactly how they've written it. Then here is a scale point. Now we have 1, 2, 3 here, but the Likert scale for the CESD is 4. So we'd go down here to statements and click on 4. No, that's wrong. That's how many questions. We will go down to scale point. Here they are, and click on 4 so that we have the right amount. Then we would click rarely or none of the time, less than 1 day, some or a little of the time, 1 to 2. Oh, very good, Megan. One to 2 days, occasionally, or a moderate amount of the time. And then our final Likert scale was most or all of the time. 5 to 7 of the last week. 5 to 7 days of the last week. So that's really important, so that your participants will be able to see what their options are. Then we would write the statements in. I'm not going to do all 20, just do the top 4. Okay, so you'll see here, these are the first 4 questions of the CESD scale. There are 20. We would pop them all in by going up to here and adding 20 statements. Not 21, 20. So that's where they would all be. You will see here that the CESD questions, I was bothered by things that usually don't bother me. I do not feel like eating, my appetite was poor, and I felt depressed, were all positive statements towards depressive symptoms. So if someone clicked on most or all of the time, that would indicate that they were bothered by things that usually didn't bother them for most of the week. You'll see here, though, that I felt I was just as good as other people is reversed. So if you were feeling depressed, you would probably click rarely or none of the time for that question. Now, these are popped into scales just to make sure that people aren't malingering, which means just clicking the same button over and over and over. So when you look at your data set and you look at people, that the people who are clicking mostly or all of the time should then click rarely or none of the time on this question. So it's reverse coded. Now, we don't do anything about that inside Qualtrics. We reverse code things, as you will have seen in the stats workshops in the data analysis software. So you want to keep them all here. It doesn't, you don't need to do anything about them. But I will show you later how to code these Likert scales so that they're in line with the actual scoring of the CESD. But that's a step that I take after I have developed all of my scales. I go back through and recode everything. So I'll show you that in a moment. Any questions about matrix scales or your pre-validated scales? No? Okay, so then we would add a block and we would put in our dietary screening tool, which is our diet quality questions. These are all multiple choice. So this is not a scale. We put these in as multiple choice. So the first one, we can actually add a little bit of text at the beginning of that if we want to give the participants an idea of what's happening next. So I might actually do that. So I can change this. If I click this as multiple choice, I can just change it to a text and add the text here. Okay, so we've done a little bit of a information box for the participants. Then we will add our next question. Why is it not letting me do that? Multiple choice. So we've got the DST up there. Our first question is, how often do you usually eat whole grain breads? Roti or naan? So this was added one for our Indian population. Then we have 3 questions which are there. Never or less than once a week. 1 or 2 times a week. 3 or more times a week. Good. So there would be our dietary screening questions. There's 20 of those. So again, I'm not going to put all 20 in to save time, but that gives you an idea of that you can also use a multiple choice for scoring and scale questions. Great. The next type of question that I'm going to show you, you can also use sliders for scale. So this time I might do the social connectedness scale, which is one of my covariates. And show you how to do a sliding scale. So again, we would add another block because this is a brand new scale. We would call it the social connectedness scale. We would add a new question. We add a slider. Up here. Following. All right. Following number statements that reflect various ways in which we view ourselves. Rate the degree in which you agree or disagree with each statement. You'll see here that they're not actually letting you know that we're asking about social connection, which is quite a smart thing to do. So in the social connectedness scale, our scale is from 1 to 6, but here we have a scale from 0 to 100. I'm just going to close the window because someone is mowing outside, which is fun. I hope that's a little bit better. Sorry about that. Okay, so we have our sliding scale and we have how many questions in the social connectedness scale? There will be 20, so we will make that 20. I'm obviously not going to fill out all 20. Scale points, we want the scale to be from 1 to 6. And we don't want 10 grid lines. We only want 6. No, we've lost number 3. We want 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're all there. Good. But we want to label these. So here's our choice. Okay, there's some of our choices. Now up here, that's interesting. I want to label these. So maybe add labels. That didn't work. I know how to do it. Okay. So let me see. I've never really used sliders before. That's why I don't know how to do this. We will come back to this when I figure it out.
I think it's where did I find it? Labels. Add labels. On your, I think on the left-hand side menu there.
Oops, where are we now? Back to 7. Very interesting.
It's in there somewhere.
It is. I'll look in the break and I will tell you after the break.
So you want to add a label that's something like
agreed.
0. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to change these, but I can't figure out how to. That's okay.
Yeah.
I thought you were on the right track when you started with add a label, and it started with 1. And then if you entered that, it would probably move to
Oh.
Add
2.
label. You got to switch.
Okay, let's see.
Yeah,
Let's see.
there you go. Yeah.
I don't know if it is.
Not quite what you want.
No. And I would have done it this week already. Look. Oh no, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, this is what I've done in this one. 1 strongly disagree to 6 strongly agree. Okay.
Right.
That's a way around it. I will still go and find out how to do it, because there's obviously a way to do it. Ah. Cool. So I will get back to you on that. What is the time? Oh, perfect timing for the break. It's 11:30. So we might have a break. I'll go and figure out what's going on here, and
Okay.
we'll come back in 5. So
Okay.
11:37. I will see you then.
Fantastic. Okay.
Okay, we are back. Is everybody else back?
Yeah, and I've started recording again.
Perfect. Okay, good stuff. All right, so I worked out the scale problem.
Okay.
And Saul was right. I was in the right place. I was just not looking correctly. So to create the scale labels, we go to add labels, which is where we were on the right track. Add labels, but there was only 1 label. So I wanted 6 labels, right? Strongly disagree to strongly agree. Now, they don't align completely perfectly with the scale, but good enough for now. And then your participant can slide the scale to where they want it. Now, it's always important to leave it on 1 and not leave it on 0, because if they just miss 1, then they will get a 0. So that's why I don't use sliders, because if a participant accidentally misses 1, then it gives a false reading. Now, that's a really good point to talk about forcing a response. So up the top here in our questions, there is a option to add a requirement to force the participant to complete that question. Now, I usually force responses on all my questions except for sensitive questions like weight for women and body image type questions. The participants know that they're doing a survey about depression, so I would force response all the depression questions, otherwise they're not going to be valid for the analysis, things like that. So forcing a response is a really good option. It won't let them continue on to the next block until they have completed that question. It will keep flicking them back there. Nice. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do is these are all the main things that you will use to build your survey. So it's actually quite simple and easy. The more complex, complicated choices I have never used. These are the main ones that I have used, but all of these other ones, they work in the same ways. They are just different ways of aligning questions. So you can play around with them. The important thing is, when you finish your survey, not to forget your debrief statement. So this is really important. So you want to copy and paste your debrief statement directly from what ethics will approve and make sure that everything is the same. So we've got our debrief statement. It will be a text or a graphic. So you can also maybe take a photo or get a JPEG of the actual a better formatted version of your debrief statement if you want, and your participant information statement. Tidy it up a little bit. Make sure in circumstances where you've put things like insert link, you make sure that you do. So this is taking you to a separate page to ensure your email address is not associated with survey answers. If you would like us to send a copy of the findings to you. So here I would just pop in a link to another Qualtrics survey. I would develop another Qualtrics survey where the participant can put their email address and their name in. And that way that we can send them things and their details are not linked to their participant ID so that we can't identify them in the future. So that's really important. Make sure that you provide in your debrief statement how to contact the research team, and then links to if the survey has impacted their mental health. And then the ethics about if you have any concerns, who to contact as well. And then there will be another little box at the end of the survey that says thank you for your time. So that's creating a survey in Qualtrics. Now I'm going to move on to teaching you what to do after you have finished building your survey and how to use Qualtrics while you're collecting data, etc. Are there any questions that you have for me about data survey creation before we move on to some of the tips and tricks that we have inside Qualtrics that we can use when we are collecting data or putting our data into our analysis software?
Before we move on, I wouldn't
Sure.
mind just another look at your sort of end of survey statement there again.
Yeah, no worries. My debrief statement?
Yes.
Yep, so it always includes the same thing, and SEU has a pro forma or a template for both the participant information sheet and the debrief statement, so that's really handy. It will always have a thank you. It will reiterate that the survey was anonymous, that your details will be kept confidential and de-identified. I always ask them if they want a copy of the findings and provide a link for them to. You could also do that if you would like to be involved in future focus groups or interviews on this study. Please put your information in here. Then information about the researchers, how to contact the researchers, information about who to contact if you have felt any discomfort or concerns from the survey, and then the contacts for the ethics, who to email if you have ethical concerns about the survey. Great,
Thank you.
No worries. Okay, so the next thing that I do when I finish creating my survey is I go in and make sure that all the values of my scales are coded correctly. And it took me years to figure out how to do this. And I used to spend hours in SPSS trying to fix the problems because Qualtrics sends out whatever it wants on the labels. So a good example of this is the CSD 20. So it's a 20 item Likert scale. The items are 0, 1, 2, and 3. So if we go into this question, click on the question, and we go down to so many options. Recode values. We click on recode values. Qualtrics would have sent this to our data analysis software as coded 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, if you run your CSD 20 analysis at 1, 2, 3, 4, it's going to be inflated and it's not going to be comparable to other research that's used the CESD because everyone else uses 0, 1, 2, and 3. So it's really simple inside of Qualtrics to make sure that all of your scales are coded correctly so that that doesn't happen. And I also go in and do it with my demographics. I just make sure, because Qualtrics can do some weird things for some reason. So we go into gender and we recode the values. So they're 1 and 2. You can recode them 0 and 1. You can rename the variables inside this box as well. That looks okay. So I wouldn't worry about that one. What about gender? Let's see, recode values. We've got male 1, female 2, non-binary 3, prefer not to say 4, non-conforming 5, and other 6. So that's fine as well. So nothing weird is going on there. Obviously, there's no values to code in age because we're asking them to put their own values in. We've done the CSD. The DST, okay, let me go and see how this one is coded. So always making sure you go back to the survey scoring sheets and just making sure. So the dietary screening tool, the first question. Now, the reason why we put the dietary screening tool in as multiple choice questions is because each question is worth different values. So we just go through all of them and make sure they're correct. So for this one, recode values, never or less than once a week with 0. So you would get a 0 score on dietary quality if you weren't eating nothing, no whole grains. If you're eating whole grains 1 or 2 times a week, you would get a dietary quality score of 3. And if you're eating whole grains 3 or more times a week, you would get a dietary quality score of 5. So that's now coded correctly. When you pop it into SPSS, it will be in the correct code. So you don't have to worry about it later. Now, there is no recode value on this one because strongly disagree and strongly agree are already coded 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, which is in line with the social connectedness scale. So that's the actual code here. So that's correct. We don't have to worry about that one. Any questions about coding your variables? Good. All right. So once you've done that, your survey's kind of ready to go, which is really exciting. However, you need to stop, copy it, put it into a Word doc and send it off to ethics before you can publish it and send it out to the world. But there are a couple of things that we do first. So we can go and have a look at the look and feel of the survey and play around with settings on how you want your participants to see it. So that is here, this little paint roller is your look and feel of your survey. There are so many different options that you can play around with. Like I said, if you're using your SCU account, it will already have the SCU logo. You can go through and just see what it looks like. You can play around with it. So we can do the recapture. This is what it looks like here. There's the next button. This is what our participant information sheet looks like. Like I said, you could take a JPEG of the actual participant information sheet on the SCU letterhead and pop it in there, and that would maybe look a little bit better than this, but you can play around with it as well. You can also here look at what the survey would look like on your mobile. See that one, the participant information sheet requires scrolling over. So that might be something you wouldn't want, and you might change that. We'd click yes here. And as you can see, it's all done in the Bond theme because that's what mine looks like, but you can play around with it. So here is another option for how your survey would look. You can play around with layout. You can play around with style. So font, foreground, question spacing, all different types of things. Themes are the most fun, but like I said, the SEU theme is the best one to go with. You can pop in a logo that will already be done for you. You can do a background, all different types of things that you can do with your survey. I will revert back to my old one. So you can play around with all different types of ways that your survey could look. Then you can have a look at your survey options in here as well and play around with those. Make sure that they're all, the options button is underneath the roller. So your survey name, this is how this will look when you distribute it. So I would probably change that to something like that. You can pop in a little survey description, which will pop up when you do your distributing. Now make sure that ethics has approved this, how you explain it. You can change the language and interpretation if you're sending it out to non-English speaking participants. You can have a look at responses, allow a back button so participants can go back and change their answers if they like. Allow respondents to finish later. Oh, this is an interesting one. I don't know. Respondents very rarely come back if you do this. What do we do with incomplete survey responses? I just leave them and record them. It doesn't matter how much of the survey they complete. You will be in charge of all that at data analysis stage. So you just keep everybody, no matter how much, and you remove them in the data cleaning stage. Survey availability, and an inactive survey message for when you close the survey off and someone tries to get to it. Security access, this is where you can do another reCAPTCHA, like a more stringent reCAPTCHA. So for bot detection, you can turn this on and it will create a more stringent reCAPTCHA at the beginning. You can do a security scan monitor, lots of different things. You can anonymize responses, so not recording their IP address, their location data, and their contact info. I usually just keep that in and remove them at data analysis, just in case you do get bots, because you can identify bots through their IP address and their location. If there's one IP address coming up on multiple surveys, then you can tell that a bot from one computer has done that. Post survey. So you can send a thank you email to all your participants like a week after, one day after. Manage a contact list. I wouldn't do that. That destroys identification, de-identification. So there's all different types of options that you can use inside your survey, and you have full control over. Okay, so the next thing that we do once we've made sure that our options and everything are good is we pilot our survey. So to do this, we'll just go back into the survey builder. We can preview our survey. I think this actually creates a participant though, so just be very careful when you're doing your previews that before you publish, you delete any additions that you or your team have created by piloting the survey. Now, the reason that you pilot it is because you want to make sure everything's working properly. So the reCAPTCHA is working. We've got our participant sheet that looks good. You want to make sure here that if you have been a vegetarian, if you have not been a vegetarian for your adult life, that it sends you to the end of the survey. So we just check that that works. Yay, excellent. It did work. So then we would go back. You can also share the preview with your collaborators or anyone else that you want to pilot your survey on, which is really good. We can see the mobile view at the same time if you click that button there. If you identify the survey as anonymous, I gather you cannot send out a thank you as you won't be collecting information on the participants, or you can send it out to all who sent the link. Yeah, that's right. I don't know how it sends the thank you message out. That's interesting. I've never actually clicked on that before. All right, so we got sent to the end of the survey. We want to restart, have another look at what it looks like. And you want a few different people to pilot the survey, someone on a computer, someone on a smartphone, and just make sure that all the spelling is correct. And see how long it takes your pilot to run so that it's within 10 to 15 minutes. As you can see, the demographics are in, I'm not 30, that was a dream. And just make sure that you're going through and just seeing what it looks like. So you'll see here that our matrix scale looks like this on the computer, but a matrix scale on a mobile looks like this. So you've got your little blurb at the top, then you've got your question. You answer your question, and once you've answered it, it automatically sends you to the next question on a mobile. So you just want to make sure that this is all working in a way that you want it to. That's interesting, because that should have been a forced response. So I would go back, because I didn't click everything. I would go back and make sure that that was a forced response, because a message should have come up then saying you haven't completed the rest of this question. So we're just going through, making sure, having a look at the sliders. What do they look like? Well, it looks much better here than it did when we were creating it. Did we make that a forced response? Yes, see? So please answer this question. So once you preview, it will tell you. So I know now that I need to go back to CESD and create a forced response. Right, cool. Any questions about previewing and piloting? Like I said, if you share here, you can copy the link to the preview, send it to your collaborators, and they can preview it. And the most important thing, when it's ready to go, once you've got ethical approval to send your survey out to the world, don't forget to publish it. Lots of people do forget, because there's a space in time between ethics approval and when you send it out. So how do I get out of this section? No. Oh, you can create a QR code. That's cool. All right. I don't know how to get back. Oh, just get out of it. Yay. All right. So over here is the publish button. I'm not going to publish this because it is not a real survey. So don't forget to publish your survey. The next thing that we are interested in doing, once it's out there in the world and you're collecting data and it's live, you can share the survey with your collaborators. So this is an important step not to forget as well, because you want everybody who's a co-author on your paper or on the team to have access to the survey and be able to look at the results and the reports and things like that. So you need to go all the way back out to your projects page. Click on the ellipses at the end of this. Click on collaborate. Now, if you're at SCU and you're collaborating with an SCU person, you can just type their email into this box and it will, or you can find people. So these are all the people who work at Bond, and I can just collaborate with them by clicking on their names. If you have someone who is at another university, you can just type their email address in. You should be able to. Why is it not doing this? Thanks, Jubilee. Why is it not letting me do this? This happened to Carl the other day as well when he was trying to do it. Let me see. The best thing about Qualtrics is you can Google when you get stuck. I know there's a way of collaborating to other unis that aren't on your list. Yeah, here we go. Collaborating inside your organization. We know how to do that. Collaborating outside of your organization. Huh, that's what I was doing. Oh well. Collaborate. Let's see. Yes, so you just type the person's email address into the collaborate box. You can type a message saying, here is our Vegetarian for Life survey. I'm not going to do that because that will send to Letha, a collaborator, a non-usable survey. And then you just click send. Good. Okay, getting your survey out to your participants. The fun bit. So you will see inside of, we'll go back inside our project, our Veg for Life 2 project. And up the top here, we have survey, workflows, distributions, data analysis, results, and reports. So to get your data or your survey out to the public, you click the distributions button and wait. Now you can distribute your survey through email, on the web, through social media, through mobile. Everyone has, and because this hasn't been published, it doesn't have the link because I haven't published it yet. But you can send a link, you can compose an email and send it through Qualtrics, and you can do a QR code as well. Very simple, very easy. Then while we are collecting data, we can analyze some things. So what I might do, because this is not a live survey and has no data inside it, I might actually go back and open up the one that is live. So I'll go back to projects. Where is she? I has lost it. Here it is. So this is the survey that's actually got participants in it. While we are running the survey, we can look without putting our data into an analysis program. Qualtrics has a few kind of tricky things that you can look at. So here is all of your data for your participants. Each row is a single participant and each column is each question. Now you can use tools to look at different columns. You can add a filter to a column. I don't really use these too much, but you can add filters. The best thing about this is this box here. It tells you how many people have done your survey, which is really fun. You can use the field editor to look at different spots in your data. Lots of different options. I don't tend to use that too much. The more efficient way of looking at your data is by looking at your results and your reports. This is where I mostly track what's going on. So this tells me that how many people have done the recapture. Have you consumed a plant-based, vegan or vegetarian diet your whole entire life? Now, this was an important one because those who clicked no and those who clicked yes. So these were people who had misinterpreted the recruitment blurb. And these were the people who had actually been vegetarian for life. But when we first started our survey, these were even. So we had like 50 people who had ticked no and 50 people who had ticked yes. And I'm like, what is going on here? And this question actually said, have you been a vegetarian your entire life? When a lot of people were excluding the time when they were children and they didn't have a choice, but had decided to become vegetarian when they turned 18 or they had a choice over the food that they were including in their life. So we changed the recruitment and we changed our population sample to people who had been vegetarian for their adult life. And after changing that fixed this problem where we're having lots of people saying no, because I haven't been vegetarian my whole life, but I've been a vegetarian the whole time I've been able to choose. Then you can have a look at gender, how many males and females. That's good to keep an eye on. Obviously, in psychological research, we always get more female participants. We can have a look at age, which is a bit difficult because it's a free text answer, so we're going to get lots. We're going to get 600 different answers here. And that will happen for all your continuous variables. But you can have a look at other things of interest as well. So what was a really interesting, oh, here, this one. So I kept an eye on this question the whole way through the data collection. So I was trying to make sure that we had even amounts of vegans and vegetarians. So we had here those who were vegan, 155, and those who were semi-vegan, who ate mostly no animal products. So it's about 188. And then we're having a look at the vegetarians, making sure that we weren't getting too many flexitarians as well, because they eat meat and that would skew our data. So keeping an eye on your on what's going on in your data set can be really important. The other thing that I find really helpful is the reports button. There are no reports to this project. Why not? Maybe because it's closed. While it's active, it will bring up reports of what's going on. So maybe because it's closed, it isn't. Cool. So those are all the different things that you can do during data collection to keep an eye on what is going on. We've been through all this. Okay, once you have finished your data collection, now this is a really important thing that you need to do before you start analyzing data. You always should have a prior decision about when you're going to close your data. It should be either a number of participants or a time frame, but you should never open your survey and then just wait until people stop doing your survey or time has elapsed, 3 months has elapsed, because you really need to have some a priori decisions about data collection, or that can also skew your data. But once you do finish, you want to export your data into a data analysis program. So you want to go to data and analysis, export and import, and you can export your data either to Excel, SPSS, Google Drive. I usually just send it to SPSS and clean it in there. And this is where we started workshop 1 for the statistics workshops. So if you haven't seen them, go back, watch them on YouTube. I show you exactly how to get your Qualtrics data into SPSS and how to clean it and how to get it into Excel and clean it as well. Perfect. That's Qualtrics in a nutshell. Does anyone have any questions for me at this stage?
Hello.
Hi, Benjamin. How you doing?
Yeah, good. Sorry, I'm just starting a PhD, and as part of that, we're doing a stakeholder survey with a bunch of commercial mud crab fishermen,
Cool.
kind of getting their perceived impacts on flooding and what's kind of reduced the catch quality and the catch numbers they've been getting the last few years.
Sure.
So we're not too concerned with the demographics, more
Yep.
just concerned about, I guess this will shape the other chapters of the PhD. So more just stressing what they think the causes are. They've provided us with a lot of funding as well. So more so that will guide exactly what we're doing.
Yep.
Keeping them involved. And I was just kind of thinking how long one of these surveys should go for something like that.
Not long at all. I mean,
All right.
I've got surveys that have like 3 or 4 questions in them.
Yeah, so super short. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It matters when the surveys end up being really long because your participants just start leaving.
Yeah.
So, and you don't want to overburden people. Anything longer than kind of 15, 20 minutes is too long.
Yeah.
You really need to start thinking about like narrowing your research focus and your research questions down, or creating 2 surveys rather than, but yours sounds really cool. Like a couple of questions for them. The demographics aren't necessary. You're probably not using that survey to do analysis, but it's more like a information seeking tool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
Perfect. Thanks for that.
No problems. Does anyone else want to share what they're doing and have any questions about their specific projects that I'm happy to answer? If not, if you do think of a question later on, feel free to email me at any time. I'm very happy to answer emails. If you feel like you need someone to step you through Qualtrics, also feel free to email either me or Alison and we can help you with that.
Megan, could I just ask you a question around Qualtrics and surveys versus if you need more in-depth detail, and so you want more sort of not necessarily text that you want, but interview style. Can Qualtrics be really good for getting a mixture of both, or does it really skew what you're trying to do if you're really wanting to understand maybe people's thoughts or beliefs? Would Qualtrics be more, I guess, that quantitative data that you want to know in facts, and if you want to know more about thoughts, beliefs, how people perceive things, you would maybe use an interview style?
That's a good question, really. One of my friends actually did a large scale survey on secondary teachers across Australia, and it wasn't possible for her to do that amount of interviews. And so she sent the survey out. It had a couple of quantitative questions, but it had mostly qualitative answer boxes where you could free type whatever you wanted into the boxes. And she got heaps and heaps, over 600 teachers answer the survey and put in their rich thoughts about their experiences with student belonging and perceptions of teaching. And it was actually really, really good. And it would really depend on your research question. If your research question suits more of a intimate focus group style question where you're wanting people to bounce off each other, that's better to do in a focus group. But if you're trying to get a lot of ideas or thoughts from people, from a large amount of people, Qualtrics is perfect for that. In fact, I think that most Qualtrics surveys should have some form of qualitative answer box for most of their quantitative answers, because you're not getting the whole answer. Like, why did you answer that question that way is something that I'm really about mixed methods research. I'm a very pragmatic researcher. So I don't believe you can get all of the answer from quantitative methods, and I don't believe you can get all the answers from qualitative methods. So mixing them together in a survey is the perfect way of doing that.
Great, thank you.
No problems. That was a good question.
Just to add to that, sometimes the way people will write a text answer is quite different to the way they would speak it in an interview. So you could possibly see in a survey if they would be open to an interview later down the track.
Yeah, that's a really good one.
Because I found in some research that, oh, just send me the questions and I'll email them to you. Well, that's good. But an interview, even just on the phone and getting permission to record and everything, you're getting the way they speak and the ums and ahs and everything.
100%.
Yeah.
I agree. And it all comes down to your research question.
Mm.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alison. I think that's what my feedback has been, where tricks and just survey, but my lecturer is probably more encouraging me to use a smaller sample group, but do an interview base to get more depth about free text. They can speak freely as opposed to writing and typing it all down. So, but I'm still really interested in Qualtrics because I think it gets used, in my work, etc. But just coming today and seeing what you can do with it has been terrific.
Yay, that's good.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Thor. Good to see you. Yes, I'm off to download the staff version. I'll send that link out to everyone again, rather than the free version.
Perfect.
Oops. Oh, well.
That's all right.
Yeah. Oh, and I put a link there that people are welcome to come and present to our Praxis conference, run by the Postgraduate Association. It's happening at Gold Coast campus, 22nd, 23rd of June. All postgraduate students are welcome on any aspect of your research. So have a think about that. We'd love to see you present. Okay. Thank you, Jason. Thanks, Carol. Looking forward to playing with it more. Yeah, absolutely. So much in there to play with. Hey. Yeah, excellent. Well, it looks like people are sort of heading off. So thank you very much for your time, Megan. That was excellent. I learned a great deal. I was scurrily kind of, typing as you were going along. So it was good to see your examples. It's really helpful.
Perfect.
Okay, I'm going to stop there. Stop recording.